The air in Conakry crackled, not with static from old radios but with an electric tension, a palpable sense of change. The government was about to speak, a message prepared, for the nation, and for the world, a declaration that would alter everything. Guinea was taking a stand. The words when they came were clear, they were uncompromising. Broadcast across the humid air, echoing in government halls, reaching far beyond Guinea's borders. Global markets reacted instantly. Headlines flashed across screens, from New York to London, Paris to Beijing. A shockwave emanated from West Africa. A small nation had roared. Decades of agreements, now dust. Contracts with powerful Western firms, deals concerning bauxite, iron ore, gold, diamonds, Guinea's treasures, were declared null, void. The government did not mince words. The message was blunt. Old ways of doing business were finished, over. A new era had begun. This was more than policy. It was a nation's cry, a demand for respect, for fairness, for its share. No longer would Guinea accept crumbs from the rich table of its own earth. The time for exploitation was over. The time for partnership had come. But on Guinea's terms, this was the Conakry Declaration. Guinea. A land blessed, cursed some might say, by the very riches beneath its soil. Mountains of bauxite, the world's largest reserves, vast deposits of iron ore, Simandou, gold glittered in its rivers, diamonds lay hidden, a treasure chest for the world, but not always for its people. For generations others decided, colonial masters first, drawing lines on maps, claiming what was not theirs. Then after independence, new players, multinational corporations arrived. With briefcases and promises, contracts were signed, often in haste, often in ways not fully transparent. The wealth flowed outwards, ever outwards. The people of Guinea saw little. Roads remained unpaved, schools lacked books, hospitals lacked medicine, poverty remained a stubborn guest, amidst unimaginable mineral wealth, a paradox that stung, a wound that never healed. How could a land so rich have so many people so poor? This question haunted the nation. This system seemed entrenched, a web of international finance, corporate power, global demand, supported by compliant local elites. For decades it endured, resistant to change, resistant to please. The arrangements persisted year after year, deal after deal, until a breaking point was reached, until the people and new leaders said enough. Then came Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, a figure in uniform, tall, imposing. In September 2021, he stepped onto the stage. The old government was swept aside. He spoke of change, of restoration, of giving Guinea back to Guineans. Many listened, some with hope, others with skepticism born of experience. But his words carried weight. He promised a new direction. His new government moved swiftly. They looked at the mining sector, the heart of Guinea's economy, the source of its potential wealth, the source of its past pain. All existing mining contracts were put under review, a bold, assertive move. This was not business as usual. This was a fundamental shift. The new demands were clear. Local beneficiation was key. Refine our bauxite into alumina here. Build steel plants for our iron ore. Create jobs, real jobs, for Guineans. Develop our infrastructure with mining profits. These were not requests. They were conditions for any future engagement. The rules of the game had changed. No longer just digging and shipping. Exporting raw earth for others to process. Guinea demanded more. It demanded value addition. It demanded a share in the prosperity derived from its own natural heritage. This was Colonel Doumbouya's gambit, a high-stakes play, for Guinea's economic sovereignty, and for the dignity of its people. The news hit Western capitals hard. Paris, London, Washington, D.C. Phones began to ring incessantly. In corporate headquarters, in government ministries, there was disbelief, then anger. How could this happen? Guinea was rewriting the script, a script long authored by others. The established order was challenged. This was an unwelcome surprise. Diplomats were dispatched, urgently, lobbyists were activated, quietly, mining companies voiced their concerns, loudly. They spoke of sovereign risk, of sanctity of contract, of scaring away investment. This was not the partnership they knew. This was a confrontation, a direct challenge to their interests, their carefully laid plans disrupted. International financial institutions weighed in. The International Monetary Fund, the World Bank. They issued familiar warnings, cautionary notes about the investment climate, the need for stability, predictability. Their advice often echoed the concerns of Western shareholders and powerful economic blocs. The pressure mounted on Conakry, but beneath the diplomatic language and the economic forecasts lay a deeper, unspoken fear, the fear of contagion. What if Guinea succeeded? What if other African nations rich in resources, poor in development, decided to follow suit? A domino effect across the continent, that was the real nightmare. Inside the gleaming boardrooms of global mining corporations, an unsettling silence descended. Then, there were frantic calculations. The assumptions of decades were suddenly thrown into question. Guinea's move was honestly unprecedented in its scope and its audacity. Old certainties had vanished and a new uncertain reality dawned. Financial officers tallied potential losses, billions of dollars in investments with future profits now uncertain. Share prices flickered nervously on stock exchanges worldwide. The easy access to Guinea's riches, the favorable terms once enjoyed, seemed to be evaporating, like morning mist under a rising sun. It was a harsh awakening for many. Strategic planners wrestled with options. Should they comply with Doumbouya's demands? Build refineries? Share more profits? This meant a radical shift, a costly reevaluation of their models. Or maybe should they pull out, cut their losses, abandon projects and risk losing access forever? Or fight back through other channels? Each path held significant risks. This was uncharted territory. For too long, the power dynamic had been heavily skewed. African nations negotiated from weakness. Now, Guinea was speaking with a newfound strength. Its voice was firm, resolute. It was demanding to be an equal partner, not just a source of raw materials. The mining giants had to listen. Guinea's stance was not isolated. It was part of a larger current. A growing tide across Africa. Resource nationalism. The idea that a nation's wealth should primarily benefit its own people. This sentiment was gaining momentum, fueled by decades of perceived unfairness. A new generation was finding its voice and, demanding its rightful inheritance. Look to Niger, its uranium, its oil. New leaders there questioned old deals often made with former colonial powers. Look to Mali, its gold mines. Similar questions were being raised about who truly benefits. Look to Burkina Faso, its mineral wealth. A pattern was emerging across the Sahel and beyond, a push for greater control. Younger leaders were stepping forward, often from military backgrounds. They spoke a language of sovereignty, of national pride, of economic justice. They were less beholden to old colonial ties or established Western partnerships. They were impatient for change and unafraid to challenge the existing global economic order. The old ways were indeed crumbling. The post-colonial arrangements that kept Africa dependent were being dismantled, piece by piece. A new Africa was asserting itself. Its message was clear and simple. Our wealth, our resources, our terms. This was not just about money. It was about dignity and the future of a continent. As some Western doors seemed to close or become more difficult to navigate, other doors were opening. New partners were emerging, from the East primarily. China's presence in Africa had been growing for years. In Guinea, its footprint was already large, especially in bauxite and iron ore. Now that relationship might deepen. China often came with different offers, like infrastructure projects, roads, railways, ports, stadiums, hospitals, government buildings, often in exchange for resource access. The terms could be opaque, the debt implications sometimes worrying. But the deals were often faster, with fewer overt political conditions attached, at least initially, than traditional Western aid or investment. The BRICS group of nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, was expanding, gaining influence. It presented itself as an alternative to Western-dominated global institutions, a new pole in a multipolar world. For African nations like Guinea, this offered more options, more leverage, more room to maneuver. They were no longer limited. This geopolitical realignment empowered African countries. They could now play different powers against each other, to some extent, seeking the best possible terms for their resources and their development. The shadow of old colonial masters and the dominance of Western finance was beginning to recede. Africa was looking globally, seeking respect. Guinea's path is a bold one, but it is also a perilous one, a tightrope walk without a safety net below. Can Guinea navigate this complex terrain? Can it achieve its ambitious goals? The challenges are immense, both internal and external. Success is not guaranteed and the stakes are incredibly high. Powerful forces are likely to resist. Western corporate interests, their home governments, international financial institutions, they may exert pressure through diplomatic channels, through economic means. The threat of isolation is real. Capital flight is a danger. Old allies may turn cold. Internally, Guinea faces hurdles. Does it have the capacity to manage its resources effectively, to negotiate complex deals wisely, to ensure that newfound wealth benefits all its citizens and is not lost to corruption or mismanagement? Maintaining national unity and purpose will be crucial for this journey, yet the potential prize is enormous. True economic independence. A future where Guinea's wealth builds Guinea's schools, hospitals, roads, where Guinean youth find meaningful work in their own country. A future of national pride and self-determination. The Guinean people watch, hope mingling with apprehension. Guinea's determined stand sends ripples far beyond its borders. It echoes in presidential palaces, in market squares and university halls, across the vast African continent. It is a symbol of defiance but also a symbol of hope. A small nation's courage can inspire larger movements. This is more than just Guinea. Could this be the spark, the catalyst for a genuine African economic awakening? A true renaissance long hoped for, where Africa moves from being a mere supplier of raw materials to a continent that processes its own wealth, that builds its own industries, that trades with the world on terms of equality and respect. This is about reclaiming dignity, the dignity of a people, the dignity of a continent. For too long, Africa's story was written by others, its resources exploited by others. Now, a new chapter is being penned by Africans themselves. The chains of a difficult past are being challenged and broken. The world watches with mixed emotions, some with trepidation, some with admiration. As Guinea takes its bold gamble, it is a test case, a sign of transformations to come. An entire continent is stirring. Its youthful population, its vast resources, its growing confidence. A new future for Africa is being forged, perhaps in fire,